Anthony McCarron joins us from SNY. We're talking Mets baseball here this morning on Big Board Sports 104.5 a Team ESPN Radio. And Anthony covered the Yankees and the Mets for the Daily News Now with SNY and joins us here on Big Board Sports on 104.5 the Team ESPN Radio in Albany. Roger Weiland and Chris Honorado. Good morning, Anthony. How are you?
Good, guys. How are you?
Good, man. Appreciate a few minutes. We got a ton of Yankee fans here, and we're the home of the Yankees, but we're trying to even the playing field a little bit here, and you're just the guy to help us do that. Let's start with the new manager. How about some thoughts on what you've seen? I know you've talked to him. Give me your take on Mickey Callaway.
Well, so far so good, I think. I thought he had a good weekend a little while back when he punished Dom Smith, the first base prospect who, he's vying for a job this spring, after a somewhat disappointing call-up last year at the end of the year, and he was late, and Mickey benched him for a game, which I think was the right call, and showed that, when Mickey first got here, he was very, for lack of a better way to put it, lovey-dovey, and talked about how much, the new regime was going to love the players more than they've ever been loved before, and I think some fans, sort of raised a few eyebrows over that. And so it was good to see that he can play the other side of the coin there with Smith, which was definitely necessary because what is this guy doing showing up late when he's trying for a job? So far, so good. And I think Mickey's pitching acumen will come into play with a team that is going to sink or swim based on its high-level potential with the rotation.
No doubt. I mean, it all hinges on whether or not the starting pitchers can stay healthy, and if they do, I think they've got a fighting chance to see the postseason. Can they stay healthy, Anthony? And what was your thought yesterday with Matt Harvey? It looked like he had, again, it's spring, and he's got a long way to go, but 3 shutout innings from Matt Harvey, even though it's spring training, because it's Matt Harvey, in my opinion, is a big deal.
I agree that it is a big deal, and it was a pretty representative Tigers lineup there yesterday, too, which helps a bit. And, Matt Harvey and success have long been connected to his level of confidence. When he was the Dark Knight of New York and swaggering around the mound and, getting in the gossip pages and all that sort of stuff, he was brimming with confidence. And we've seen that take a hit the last couple of years with all the injuries, the ineffectiveness, and some of his own bad behavior. Not showing up and that sort of thing. So I think that any positive, even if it is just a few innings in a spring game, is going to give him a jolt that he needs. I mean, I personally think he's set up for a good year. Will he be the dominant $200 million potential starter that we all once thought that he was? Probably never again. But I think that the chances of him being a competent member of the rotation, a number 3 type starter, he's going into a contract year. He's a free agent after the season. This is something that his agent has been talking to him about his entire professional career, about that big payday on the horizon. He stayed out of trouble this winter. He stayed out of the gossip columns this winter. So I think he was pretty focused. I think that he's more time removed from some of the bad injuries that he's had. I mean, he had 2 major surgeries in a 4-year period. So I think we're looking at everything being set up for Matt Harvey. Now he has to do it.
Anthony McCarron with us here on Big Board Sports 104.5 the Team ESPN Radio. He's on Twitter at Anthony McCarron. Of course, you'll find him on SNY. He was on last night talking about the Matt Harvey outing yesterday, the infield options the Yankees have, which we'll get to. But, Anthony, I want to ask you one more thing about Harvey here. And just watching him yesterday, I don't know that he needs to return to throwing 97 and 98 and trying to blow hitters away. For me, he always seemed to be most effective and dominant based on the movement of his fastball. Velocity aside, it looked like it was jumping at batters when he was at his best, and I thought he had really good movement on his pitches yesterday. Is he a guy who can kind of reinvent himself in a way, do you believe, the way somebody like Justin Verlander has throughout his career?
Yes, I think he can. It's always easier when you're pitching in the high 90s because your mistakes are, they're still hard to hit. And, when you drop a few ticks, things get easier to square up for the hitters. And, but I do think that this guy has the repertoire and the pitching moxie to reinvent himself if need be. We saw 96 yesterday, which is fantastic. I mean, he could pitch that way at that. He touched it yesterday, so he can pitch at that all year? And if so, I mean, I think he's set up for success. And, another thing he did yesterday that Mickey Callaway noticed was, he self-corrected on the mound a little bit at one point, and that was something that he had trouble with last year. I mean, last year was a nightmare for him. I mean, I think there's a stat out there that his ERA 6.70 was the worst by any Met pitcher in franchise history who had made 15 starts and thrown at least 70 innings. So that's a bad club to be in. And, this guy, I think he's, maybe his pride was a little wounded by that as well, and some of the other missteps along the way. And, I think he could put it all together and have a really nice year.
How about, all right, we talk about pitching. How about the lineup? I mean, is this going to be good enough, the lineup, to produce enough runs?
That's a great question. They do have some obvious offensive assets, and I like what they did in the offseason in some of the things where they added, they got Jay Bruce back. They brought in Todd Frazier. I think those are nice moves. Sometimes I wonder if the catchers are going to, add more offense, but at the end of the year last year, Travis d'Arnaud and Kevin Plawecki played well, and they hit. And if that was a small sample of what's to come, then that's, those are good things for the Mets too. Who knows what they're getting from Adrian Gonzalez at first base? We have no idea coming off of his back woes last year and his lost season. That was kind of a flyer, but I think a good one to take the chance. Center field, they need Michael Conforto back because he is a legitimate offensive performer, a real threat in that lineup, and they're sort of not whole until he's back there. He and Cespedes together in a lineup give you these two spots that can really mash. Brandon Nimmo has impressed in spring training so far. He's a good on-base guy. He'll take a walk, which kind of mixes in perfectly with the Met hitting philosophy. What's the shortstop going to give you? Ahmed Rosario, a nice-looking prospect. He never walks, strikes out a little too much, struggled a bit in his first time in the majors last year. Is he going to be an offensive asset? That's to come. We don't know. So there's a lot riding on the offense, I think, for them, and we don't necessarily have a lot of answers so far, except that, you can figure, I think Todd Frazier is going to hit 25 homers at least for them. I think Jay Bruce will play the way he did last year. And, so they have some consistency, but, then you have Cespedes, who can either be all-world, the most dynamic player around, or be on the disabled list again with a leg injury.
All right, let's flip the page. We are the home of the Yankees here at 104.5 Team ESPN Radio. What is we were just talking before we got to you, Anthony, that this Yankee team is loaded. I mean, they've got a lot of options up and down that lineup. If their pitching can come through, how good can this Yankees team be this year? And do you think that is a two-horse race, if you will, with the Yankees and the Red Sox in the American League East?
I definitely do. And until the Red Sox signed J.D. Martinez, I thought the Yankees were significantly better than Boston. I think Boston has a rotation advantage now going into the season, with some of those guys, Chris Sale being at the top of it, obviously. But I do think the Yankees are a better team than Boston. There are some things that sort of concern me about the Yankees. As great as Luis Severino is, with all the innings he threw last year, deep into the postseason, the run, will we see a hangover effect from that? I don't know. I talked to an executive from another team the other day and asked him that question, and he said that he thought that Severino was just such a physical specimen that wasn't going to be something to worry about. Now, we'll see as the season goes on, which Tanaka are you going to get? I like Sonny Gray at number 3. Sabathia will be consistent, and the Yankees will take care of him in terms of getting him out of games early, maybe skipping him a start here and there to keep him fresh. Jordan Montgomery opened a lot of eyes last year, and they also have some options in the minors in case they run into trouble, and they're also saving money to make a deal around the deadline if the rotation becomes a concern and they need to add an ace or something like that. But I think that the Yankees can go as far as the rotation will take them. I think that the Astros are phenomenal also in the AL, so we might be looking at another rematch of the ALCS again, and maybe the Yankees get by this time, thanks to a big addition like Giancarlo Stanton.
I wouldn't complain. I'm not a Yankees or Astros fan, but I wouldn't complain about seeing that ALCS again. That's how good it was the last time around. Anthony,
tremendous series.
Right? Yeah, I know. And look, I mean, if the Yankees secure home field this time around, it could be a whole different outcome, as you alluded to there, with the Yanks come out on top. I want to ask you one more thing from me anyway, and I loved what you wrote for SNY.TV going back to your Hall of Fame ballot, and I want to read part of it here. The quote is, "The Hall of Fame, which is, after all, a museum, don't confuse it with a holy site. There are plenty of scoundrels already there. You don't get a halo when you get elected. You get a plaque." And so I'm intrigued by this because I've kind of been a staunch no Bonds, no Clemens, no steroid user. My problem here is I think there are already steroid users who have been elected to the Hall of Fame, but I understand you voted for Bonds and Clemens, and you've done so since 2016, and you've changed your tune on that. Tell us why.
I did. After a long thought, I mean, every voter, or at least all the voters I know, takes real careful thought about their ballot every year. And it's not easy. It's an enjoyable task, but it's not simple. And I just looked at it that, how can you have a museum about the history of baseball without the best pitcher of a generation and the best player of a generation in there? And I think that it's important to note we're never going to have a real conversation about the Hall of Fame and steroids until you actually have people in there who are accused of it and, who are linked to it the way those two guys are. And I feel like, it's a museum, like I wrote in the thing. And, how can you tell the story of baseball without these two guys? Bonds won 7 MVP awards. Clemens won 7 Cy Youngs. And it makes us, if they're in there, it makes us think about the things that happened and, put it on their plaque that they are accused of this, that, and the other. And you feel like they cheated. And that's fine. But I feel like it's a good example for the Hall to have that in there instead of trying to sort of, edit all of this stuff out like it never happened. And, it did happen and it changed the game. And there are, I agree with you. There are probably people in the Hall of Fame who cheated in some way. And, you could get into the whole greenies discussion and that sort of thing with some of the older players and all that. But, it's just history. Like, history is not perfect.
Special wing. Get a special wing. Call it the steroid era. Put them all in. Put them all in.
Right, and that's fine, too.
But do an asterisk,
it
something.
wasn't like listen, it wasn't like baseball and the teams were not paying these guys to play for them again.
Right.
Even though people were suspicious, right?
Yep.
Anthony, we'll be back in touch. I can tell you that. We really appreciate a few minutes. I know you're in New York now. You going back to Florida?
At some point, I think so, yeah.
Get out of this weather, Anthony.
It's going to snow big time on Wednesday. So.
I know I'm too late, though. I'm going to be here for tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. You're not going anywhere. Not going anywhere tomorrow, that's for sure.
Right.
Anthony, thanks a lot. Keep up the great work with SNY. We really appreciate a few minutes here on Big Board Sports.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Anthony.